got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Jaws, 1975. The Curse Beneath the Water. Before Star Wars. Before Jurassic Park. There was Jaws. A monster movie without a monster. Just a dorsal fin, a haunting cello, and a sense of dread that never let go. It was the birth of the blockbuster. It turned beaches into nightmares. It launched Steven Spielberg into the heavens. But it dragged others into the deep. Because the real terror behind Jaws wasn't the shark. It was what came after. One by one. The stars of this cinematic leviathan were dragged under. By illness, addiction, obscurity. And silence. This is the true cost of making a perfect predator. Roy Scheider, the sheriff who saved the town, but couldn't escape the cancer that killed him. Robert Shaw, the hardened shark hunter who died at 51, broken by demons louder than the sea. Murray Hamilton, the cowardly mayor, chain-smoking through lies, and into his grave. Lee Fierro, the grieving mother who delivered the film's most heartbreaking slap. And died alone in a care facility during a real-life plague. Susan Backlinie, the girl who screamed her way into cinematic history, and left quietly, heart stopped, waves calm. Chris Rebello, the child of Amity who never escaped the ghost of that beach. Craig Kingsbury, the salty local who gave Quint his voice, and faded away before most even learned his name. They made a movie about a shark. But in the end, it was life itself that bit the hardest. This is Jaws. And this is what it took. Roy Scheider, the sheriff who stared down the shark, and lost the fight off-screen. He was Chief Martin Brody. The man who hated the water. But chose to face the nightmare anyway. In Jaws, Roy Scheider wasn't a tough guy. He wasn't a war hero. He was just a man trying to do the right thing. While the whole town tried to pretend the danger wasn't real. And in real life, he wasn't acting. Roy Scheider was born in 1932 in New Jersey. He boxed. He danced. He fought through polio as a kid. He was built tough, not Hollywood pretty, but honest. Raw. Human. Before Jaws, he was already turning heads in The French Connection and Marathon Man. But it was Spielberg's shark epic that made him a global icon. With nothing but a badge, a cigarette, and a haunted stare. He delivered one of the most famous lines in movie history. "You're gonna need a bigger boat." He wasn't supposed to say it. It wasn't even in the script. But like everything about Jaws, it was real. And that's what made Scheider unforgettable. He didn't act brave. He acted terrified, and stood his ground anyway. After Jaws, he returned for the sequel, but fought with the studio constantly. He refused to do Jaws 3, and never forgave Hollywood for how it treated him. Instead, he chased deeper roles. All That Jazz, Blue Thunder, Romeo is Bleeding. But the roles got smaller. The budgets got cheaper. And time caught up. In the early 2000s, Scheider was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, multiple myeloma. He fought it for years. Fought it like he fought the shark. Tired, furious, defiant. But on February 10, 2008, Roy Scheider died at the age of 75. No explosions. No big send-off. Just another quiet warrior claimed by the sea of time. He wasn't the biggest name. He wasn't the loudest. But when the shark came, he stayed. Because sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do is not leave. Robert Shaw, the hunter who couldn't escape his own ocean of demons. He was the shark hunter. Tougher than steel, salter than the Atlantic. A man who chewed fear and spat blood. Every line he delivered was sandpaper. Every glance a gut punch. And when he sat down in that boat, cracked a beer, and told the story of the USS Indianapolis, you could hear every heartbeat in the theater stop. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes. Black eyes. Like a doll's eyes. That monologue? It wasn't just acting. That was Robert Shaw channeling his own ghosts. Born in 1927 in Lancashire, England, Shaw was a Shakespearean powerhouse. He had stage prestige, literary chops, and raw power. But he also had a shadow that followed him everywhere. His father died by suicide when Robert was just 12. He turned to the stage, then to the bottle. By the time Jaws came along, he was already a raging alcoholic. Burning bridges on sets, in marriages, in friendships. He fought constantly with Richard Dreyfuss. He clashed with Spielberg. He'd show up drunk, disappear, reappear, then deliver a scene so perfect it couldn't be touched. That USS Indianapolis speech. He rewrote it. Filmed it drunk once, failed. Came back sober, nailed it in one take. It's considered one of the greatest monologues in film history. And it broke him. After Jaws, his roles got darker. The Deep, Black Sunday, Avalanche Express. But he never outran the bottle. On August 28, 1978, at just 51 years old, Robert Shaw died of a heart attack on the side of an Irish road. His wife and son were in the car. He had just finished a scene on his last film. He was mid-career, still powerful, and gone. No shark got him. No storm. Just a heart too tired to carry all that fury. Robert Shaw didn't need effects. Didn't need music. He was the thunder. And when he went under, the ocean of cinema got a little quieter. Murray Hamilton, the mayor who lied to keep the town alive, and let himself sink in silence. He played Mayor Larry Vaughn. Slick, smug, spineless. A man who looked you in the eye and said everything was fine. While blood filled the water behind him. He wasn't the villain in the traditional sense. He wasn't a killer. But he let others die to protect the illusion of safety. Sound familiar? That was Murray Hamilton's genius. He made cowardice compelling. Born in 1923 in North Carolina, Hamilton had a long, steady career as a character actor. He was never flashy. Never front page. But he was everywhere. He could play charming. He could play slimy. But in Jaws, he became something more chilling. The face of denial. Every time he said, "Amity is a summer town, we need summer dollars," you saw the exact kind of man who puts profit before people. And convinces himself it's the right thing to do. And that blazer with the little anchors on it. Iconic. A costume so effective it became a meme of political cowardice. But Hamilton himself? He was nothing like Vaughn. Quiet. Private. Honest. He avoided the spotlight like it burned him. Even after Jaws, he never chased leading roles. He preferred the shadows, the hustler, the graduate, the way we were. And then the shadows caught him. In the early 80s, Hamilton was diagnosed with lung cancer. He fought it for years. But the disease stole his voice, slowly and painfully. On September 1, 1986, he died at age 63. Quiet. No scandals. No farewell tour. Just a man who spent his life playing people who looked strong, while hiding how fragile they really were. Murray Hamilton didn't die on the beach. He died off-screen. Like most of us. But every time a politician downplays a crisis, every time someone smiles through disaster, you'll see that face. That blazer. That lie. And you'll remember. He didn't need to be the monster to be deadly. Lee Fierro, the mother who slapped a legend, and died alone in silence. She played Mrs. Kintner. The mother of the second victim. She wasn't on screen for long. But when she walked up to Chief Brody, looked him dead in the eye, and struck him for not closing the beach sooner. That wasn't just grief. That was righteous fury. The entire theater went silent. It was one of the most powerful moments in the entire film. And all it took was a trembling voice and an open palm. Fierro made that moment unforgettable. Born in 1929, Fierro was never a Hollywood actress. She didn't chase fame. She didn't live for the spotlight. She was a drama teacher. A mentor. A woman who poured her life into helping others act. And did so for over 40 years in Martha's Vineyard. Jaws wasn't even meant to make her famous. She took the role as a local casting. But when the movie exploded into legend, so did her face, her slap, and her pain. She returned briefly in Jaws, The Revenge, 1987. But otherwise went back to the stage. Teaching, directing, quietly shaping young performers. She never got rich. Never walked red carpets. But she gave the world one of the most human moments in film history. Then came 2020. Fierro was living in an assisted living facility in Ohio. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the virus swept through the elderly like a tidal wave. On April 5, 2020, Fierro died of COVID-19 complications. She was 91 years old. No cameras. No headlines. Just a quiet departure from the world she once held accountable with a single slap. She didn't fight the shark. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there. Looked justice in the face. And struck it like a mother should. Susan Backlinie, the girl in the water who screamed forever. She was Chrissy Watkins. The carefree young woman who ran into the surf under moonlight. And never came back. No music. No blood. Just a flash of movement. A gasp. And then the scream that changed movies forever. It was the first shark attack in Jaws. And it didn't just kill her character. It launched 1 billion nightmares. And that's because Susan Backlinie didn't just act afraid. She was actually in pain. Born in 1946, Backlinie wasn't a typical actress. She was a stunt woman, a swimmer, and a wild animal trainer. When Spielberg cast her, he needed someone who could handle cold water, rough waves, and brutal realism. And Backlinie delivered. But here's the catch. To simulate the shark's pull, they strapped her into a harness. Then had crew members yank her violently from side to side without telling her when or how hard. So that screaming, that flailing, that pure terror, it was real. And it worked. That scene became one of the most iconic openings in film history. But it also typecast her for life. Backlinie never landed a major acting role again. She did some stunt work. A few horror films. But she was forever the girl from Jaws. She later embraced the title. Attending fan events, signing autographs, laughing about the cold water. But behind the scenes, she faded from the public eye. And then in 2024, the waves came for her once more. On May 11, 2024, Susan Backlinie died of a heart attack in Ventura, California. She was 77. No screams this time. No waves. Just a quiet death for the woman whose screams launched a cinematic tidal wave. Susan Backlinie didn't have a long Hollywood career. She had a moment. But what a moment it was. Because Jaws doesn't begin with a shark. It begins with her. And now. That water is still. Chris Rebello, the boy who played in the waves, and never really left that beach. He played Michael Brody. Chief Brody's oldest son. You remember him. Riding his raft in shallow water. Smiling. Unaware. Until the blood hit the surface. And the world tilted sideways. He wasn't the victim. But he was our stand-in. A child watching innocence get shredded by something older, colder, unstoppable. And in real life, Chris Rebello never got far from that beach. He was a local kid from Martha's Vineyard, just 12 years old when Spielberg cast him in Jaws. He wasn't an actor. He just looked right. Spielberg liked his energy, his natural charm. The way he carried himself like a real kid, not a performer. And that's exactly what made him unforgettable. After Jaws, Chris went back to school. He didn't become a star. He didn't get agents or chase red carpets. He became a fisherman. Then a police officer. He stayed in Martha's Vineyard, working jobs, raising a family, staying humble. But Jaws never left him. Tourists recognized him. Locals remembered. He was, that kid, frozen forever in one of the most iconic scenes in film history. And then, one day, his heart stopped. In 2000, at just 37 years old, Chris Rebello died of a heart attack. No press coverage. No documentaries. Just a short obituary in a town he never left. He was a kid when Hollywood found him. And when it forgot him, he never complained. Because some people weren't meant for fame. They were meant to feel real. And remind us of what we're afraid to lose. Chris Rebello didn't die on screen. But his ghost still plays in the surf. Right there, just beyond the safety buoys. Where the music starts to change. Craig Kingsbury, the man who taught Quint to talk, then vanished back into the sea. He played Ben Gardner. The fisherman whose boat is found adrift. And whose severed head floats into cinematic infamy. It's a jump scare. A cheap thrill. But behind that floating corpse was a man who helped shape the very language of Jaws. Craig Kingsbury wasn't a trained actor. He was the real deal. A lifelong Martha's Vineyard fisherman, known for his wild stories, thick Yankee accent, and a voice that sounded like gravel soaked in bourbon. When Spielberg arrived to film Jaws, he didn't just want actors. He wanted authenticity. Kingsbury gave him more than that. He helped coach Robert Shaw on how to speak like a New England shark hunter. He taught him the rhythm, the slang, the attitude. That iconic speech. That Quint cadence. It's part Kingsbury. Spielberg later said. Craig was one of the most colorful people I met. Without him, Quint wouldn't sound the same. He was offered the small role of Ben Gardner. And even in death, on screen, he made people jump out of their seats. But when filming wrapped, Craig Kingsbury did what he always did. Went back to the docks. No interviews. No Hollywood chase. He didn't care about the limelight. He cared about the water. In 2002, Kingsbury died quietly at the age of 89. No red carpet farewell. Just the tide rolling in and out. As it always had. His death wasn't reported in the trades. But ask anyone from the vineyard. And they'll tell you. Craig wasn't just in Jaws. Craig was Jaws. Because behind every great monster story, there's a man who whispers the truth before the screaming starts. And Craig Kingsbury? He didn't need to shout. His voice is still out there. In every word that comes out of Quint's mouth. They survived the shark. But not the silence that followed. They weren't chewed up on screen. They didn't all bleed in the water. But one by one, they were pulled under. By time, by fate, by the weight of a movie that never let them go. Roy Scheider, the sheriff who saved the town, but lost his fight to cancer long after the beaches were cleared. Robert Shaw, the hunter who gave the shark its match, and was swallowed by demons no harpoon could pierce. Murray Hamilton, the politician who sold safety for summer dollars, and coughed his last breath in quiet obscurity. Lee Fierro, the grieving mother who slapped a legend, then died alone in a nursing home during a real-world plague. Susan Backlinie, the first scream of a generation, pulled beneath the surface for real in her final breath. Chris Rebello, the boy with the raft and the fear in his eyes, gone before 40. Craig Kingsbury, the man who gave Quint his soul, then slipped into the tide like he was never here at all. They didn't need prosthetics. They didn't need green screens. They had sweat, salt, and truth. Jaws wasn't about a shark. It was about fear. The kind you can't outswim. The kind that follows you home. And for the men and women who made it, that fear never really left. Some died broken. Some died quietly. Some were forgotten completely. But we remember. Every scream. Every slap. Every glance at the open sea. Because the real terror of Jaws wasn't what was beneath the water. It's what came after.